Can I ask you a real personal question? How are you sleeping at night? Are you able to lay your head down at night and get a good night's sleep? Are you able to go to sleep at night and rest? Now, I know that there are some physical reasons why you may not be able to sleep. Maybe you have some sort of back pain or some sort of ailment or some sort of issue that prevents you from physically being able to get a good night's sleep. But I also believe that there is a spiritual nature to being able to sleep at night, to being able to lay your head down and sleep in peace. You know, for some time now, April and I have been in the need of purchasing a new mattress. And so a few weeks ago, we finally broke down and we bought a new mattress, and it was one of those that they ship to your door. In this extremely huge box, they roll the mattress up real tightly and deliver it right to your door. You unroll it out of the box and it has to sit for a few days as it regains life after being under incredible compression. Now, this new mattress has been a great asset to us and a great blessing as we've been able to sleep with great comfort. But you know, it doesn't matter how comfortable a mattress is. If you're not in a good standing with the Lord, if you're not in a position with the Lord where you're at peace and confident and trusting Him with your life, I believe it keeps you awake at night. There's a spiritual component to sleep that I want to share with you that comes from the Psalms. It's actually recorded for us in Psalm 127, beginning in verses 1 and 2. The psalmist writes this. He says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go rest late. Eating the bread of anxious toil, He gives to His beloved sleep." Notice the end there of verse 2. He gives to His beloved sleep. I think it is a blessing from God to be able to lay your head down at night and be at peace. Our text very clearly, beginning in verse 1, talks about the work and the movement of the Lord. It says that unless the Lord builds the house, unless the Lord watches over the city. Very clearly, our text is talking about the creative power and the protective power of the Lord. To recognize that the Lord is moving, that the Lord is building, that the Lord is protecting, that the Lord is keeping watch. But also notice in our text that there is this interactive relationship between us and the Lord. Not only is the Lord building, but we are also building. We also labor as described in verse 1. Not only is the Lord keeping watch, but as it goes on, he also says the watchman stays awake. There is an interactive relationship between us and God at which we should work, at which we should do our due diligence. But the text makes it clear that there is one decisive party in this relationship. We can work, we can keep watch, we can be diligent, but if the Lord is not building, if the Lord is not watching, it is all in vain. You know, my history with Crestview actually goes a little bit further back than many of you may be aware. In 2012, I actually partnered with Crestview to plant a church in Round Rock. It was a partnership with multiple churches, but Crestview was certainly one of the major partners in this relationship to plant a church in Williamson County. My wife and I were called to become the church planters, partnering here with Crestview and others to plant this church. We worked diligently for 6 months building a team under this vision and this mission to start and to plant a new work in Round Rock. And we got 2 weeks before our first public service, the amount of work that remained to be done was immense. If you can imagine starting a church with nothing, starting a church from nothing, starting a church with people who have never worked together, who have never served, and bringing all of that together for this climactic moment of hosting your first public worship service, then you can know what it means and feels like to be a church planter. For about the month prior to our first worship service, I was rising early and I was going to bed late. But unfortunately, my toil was what the text describes in verse 2, in which it says it was anxious toil. My labor was a lot. I was working harder than I had ever worked. But you know what? I was not sleeping. I was so preoccupied. I was so invested. I was so diligent, had so many lists and so many things on my mind that I could not sleep. In fact, for that 3-month period, from a month before we started and 2 months in, was the worst sleep I have ever gotten in my entire life. And unfortunately, in that 3 months of not sleeping, the Lord revealed to me a great lesson in my life. He revealed to me what is the truth of these 2 verses. That is this effort of anxious toil. That is this sometimes we have this lack of faith or this lack of trust in God that keeps us awake at night. We are so deep in trying to control things. We are so deep in trying to figure things out that we fail to trust God and we lose sleep. Didn't take very long for me to realize as a church planter and church pastor that I could not sustain this anxious toiling. There came a breaking point at which I finally had to surrender to the Lord, at which I had to come to Him and say, Lord, this is more than I can handle, but fortunately, it's not too much for you. And so, Father, I surrender. And after I got to that moment in my heart and prayed that prayer of surrender, I slept one of the best nights of sleep I had had in months. I hope that in this season of the pandemic, you're not losing sleep. I hope that you are not so concerned and so anxious and so toiling that you are not able to sleep. Our text literally says in verse 2 that He gives to His beloved sleep. To the one who continues to trust, to the one who continues in confidence, relying upon the Lord and surrendering their lives to the Lord, He gives rest. I think of Jesus in Matthew chapter 8 when He was on the boat amongst a great storm in His life. While the other disciples may not have been able to sleep, Jesus slept soundly. I want to encourage you that if you find yourself anxious in these days, I want to encourage you to renew your trust in the Lord, to recognize that what we are living in, the circumstances that are surrounding, are bigger than we can handle. This is a problem that we cannot fix, but it is a problem that is not too big for the Lord. And so as we work diligently, as we do our part, as we build, and as we keep watch, recognize that unless the Lord builds, unless the Lord keep His watch, it's all in vain. And so let us trust God today. With whatever your day brings, with whatever is before you this week, surrender it to the Lord. Trust the Lord, and if you find yourself laying down tonight, unable to sleep, let me encourage you to get up, spend a moment in prayer with God and surrender, and allow that peace of God, that peace that is described later in the New Testament in Philippians, that surpasses all understanding, to guard your heart and to guard your mind in Christ Jesus. I hope and I pray that tonight you will be able to find some rest. God bless.